Right, so welcome to this deep dive.
Yeah.
We're going to get right into it today.
Yeah.
Crowd psychology.
Ah.
Exploring how crowds think, believe,
Yeah.
and are swayed.
Okay.
Our guide is Gustav Le Bon's Psychologia Multimilor,
Right.
published in Romania
Yes.
in the late 19th century.
Yeah.
It offers a really unique lens for understanding this whole power of the collective, you know?
It really is incredible how relevant this book still is today,
Yeah.
considering it was written over a century ago.
Yeah.
And he starts with a very powerful statement
Okay.
saying that crowds are really shaping history. Like they're even more influential than laws and institutions.
That's a bold statement.
Yeah.
Makes you think, are we really individuals or are we just swept along by the current of the crowd, you know?
Exactly.
If laws and institutions aren't the primary drivers, like what does that even mean for how society functions?
Yeah.
For how you navigate the world?
Yeah. Le Bon believed that crowds were often very impulsive and driven by emotion rather than logic.
Okay.
He argued that to really influence a crowd, you need to appeal to their feelings and their impressions, not their rational mind.
Interesting.
And he gives this really interesting example of a legislator trying to establish a new tax.
So I would think, like, the goal is to find the most equitable, efficient way to tax people.
Well, Le Bon argues that's not enough.
Okay.
The key is perception.
Okay.
So the tax should appear the least burdensome, even if in reality it's not.
Right.
The most logical or fair approach.
Interesting.
It's about winning the crowd's favor.
Right.
Not necessarily making the soundest policy decision.
That's a little unsettling.
Yeah.
It makes you think, like, how often are we swayed by appearances?
Right.
Even if we don't realize it, you know? But then he kind of contradicts himself, right?
Well, yeah.
Because he claims that crowds are intellectually inferior to individuals, yet capable of both great good and great evil.
Yes.
How can both be true?
Well, he saw it as a matter of suggestibility.
Okay.
Crowds are very susceptible to influence.
Right.
They're capable of incredible acts of heroism or horrifying acts of cruelty, depending on who or what is directing them.
Right.
So it's like this raw, potent energy that can be channeled in vastly different ways.
I see. So it's like this powerful current. It can carry you to amazing destinations.
Yes.
Or it can dash you against the rocks. You know?
Exactly.
He gives a pretty striking contrast in the text to illustrate this point, right?
Yeah, he highlights how crowds can very easily be swayed to die for a belief, like we saw in the Crusades, for example. Yet at the same time, he points out how quickly those same crowds can become fickle and demanding and even turn on someone or something in an instant.
So understanding this whole dynamic is important, not just for leaders, but for all of us, you know?
Yeah.
It makes you consider what crowds you're a part of and how they might be impacting your beliefs and actions, you know?
Yeah.
He also claims that once you become part of a crowd, your individual intelligence doesn't matter as much.
Yeah.
Everyone becomes less observant, less rational. Is he suggesting that we literally lose brain cells?
Well, it's not about losing intelligence. It's about how our thinking processes shift when we're in a group setting.
Right.
So he believes that crowds don't engage in reasoned arguments in the same way that individuals do. They think more in images and impressions, not logic.
Got it.
And he uses this very captivating anecdote to illustrate this point. Imagine you're on a ship called La Belle Poule, sailing across the ocean. One day, the lookout spots something in the distance. A raft packed with people.
Sounds like a rescue mission.
Except, here's the twist. The entire crew, both officers and sailors, they all see this raft crowded with people.
A packed raft just appearing in the middle of the ocean. That seems a little unlikely.
And it turned out to be a collective hallucination.
Oh.
So the raft never actually existed.
Wow.
So Le Bon uses this to show how powerful these shared illusions can be in a crowd setting.
Yeah.
Even seasoned sailors who are trained to observe the sea were swept up in this. Have you ever experienced this kind of groupthink?
Yeah.
Where you felt pressured to see what others are seeing?
Yeah.
Even if your gut told you something was off?
Yeah.
How can we, as individuals, be more aware of this tendency and guard against it, you know?
Yeah, that's a really great question.
Yeah.
For all of us to consider, it makes you think about conformity.
Right.
And how susceptible we are to social pressure, you know?
Right.
And it's interesting how he then connects this whole idea to the impact of theatrical performances, saying that they've always had a profound influence on how people think and behave, you know? It makes sense.
Yeah.
Those performances, they're all about crafting this powerful imagery and emotion, you know?
Exactly. And Le Bon even takes it a step further and suggests that this is why political leaders throughout history have really understood the need to captivate the public imagination through imagery and symbolism.
Interesting.
So it's not just about rational policies, it's about putting on a good show.
Yeah, that makes me think about how modern leaders, you know, use these carefully curated images and statues and even those grand rallies, you know, to project a certain image.
It's about tapping into that primal need for spectacle and emotional connection.
And Le Bon even quotes Napoleon, who said, if I were at the head of the Jewish people, I would have restored the Temple of Solomon. So he understood the power of grand gestures and symbols. So it's less about like the concrete plans and more about creating this like aura of awe and inspiration. Makes you wonder if we're more drawn to style over substance than we'd like to admit.
That's a question.
Le Bon certainly raises. And this leads to another really fascinating concept. The enduring need for belief. He argues that crowds, both in his time and today, they have this deep need for something to believe in, something that feels like absolute and unquestionable, whether it's traditional religion or something else entirely.
Yeah, that's interesting. We live in a world now where, like, traditional beliefs are often questioned, rejected, yet new belief systems and movements and ideologies, you know, they emerge to fill that void.
He argues that even political and social beliefs, they only really stick when they take on this kind of religious quality, free from doubt, inspiring fervor and devotion. He uses this kind of striking example.
He suggests that even if atheism were to become widespread, it might morph into a cult-like belief itself.
Well, even the rejection of traditional belief systems can become this new form of unwavering faith.
Exactly.
It's about that fundamental human need to believe in something larger than ourselves, to find meaning and purpose in this, you know, complex world. Le Bon even points to the rise of Boulangism in France, which was a political movement in the late 19th century as an example of how these religious instincts persist even in seemingly secular movements.
So it's like that human need for belief is a constant. It just finds different outlets. And Le Bon believed there are several long-term factors that shape those beliefs, you know? It's almost like the underlying currents that shape the landscape of a society's worldview.
Okay, I'm ready for a rapid-fire overview. What are these factors?
All right, so he breaks it down into a few key categories. First, there's race. And it's crucial to understand that Le Bon's views on race are very much a product of his time and are considered deeply problematic by modern standards.
Of course.
We absolutely don't endorse these views. But to understand his argument, it's important to know how he used this concept.
It's like looking through a historical lens, you know?
Right.
Understanding the context in which these ideas were formed.
Exactly. So for Le Bon, race was the most important factor in shaping a nation's character or soul. He also highlights traditions, seeing them as guiding lights for society.
Right.
They resist rapid change and shape people's fundamental values. You know?
Right. The stuff that gets passed down through generations. Yeah.
Yeah. Influences how we see the world. Then there's time.
Okay.
Le Bon sees time as this incredibly powerful force.
Okay.
Both a creator and a destroyer.
Right.
It shapes and erodes beliefs slowly but inevitably, changing everything in its wake.
And what about the the structures we usually think of as shaping society? Institutions like governments, legal systems.
Well, Le Bon had a very fascinating take on institutions.
Okay.
He argued that they're actually reflections of a society's character.
Interesting.
Not the other way around.
So he's saying that institutions aren't these like independent forces shaping people, but rather products of the people themselves.
Exactly.
It's like the laws of a society are this mirror, reflecting its values, not the source of those values.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What else does he include in these long-term?
Right. So he also dives into education.
Okay.
And he was actually quite critical of the French education system of his time. He found it too theoretical and focused on abstract knowledge. He preferred the Anglo-Saxon model, which he saw as much more practical, focused on developing skills that can actually be used.
Right. In the real world.
In the real world, yeah.
So he saw a connection between how people are educated and how they think and act within a society.
Yeah.
But what about those immediate, like in the moment things that sway a crowd?
Yeah.
Like we were talking about those charismatic leaders earlier. Like what are their techniques?
Right.
What makes them so effective
at
influencing the masses?
Well, Le Bon had a lot to say about leaders. And this is where another kind of paradoxical point of his comes in. He argued that leaders are often driven more by obsession than by intellect.
So not necessarily the smartest person in the room.
Right.
But the one with the most unwavering conviction.
Exactly. They might not be geniuses, but they have this singular, powerful focus on their goals.
Interesting. Okay.
So they're often what he calls neurotics. But their very conviction becomes this hypnotic force that draws people in.
So how did these neurotic leaders actually get their ideas across?
Well, Le Bon lays out 3 key techniques of influence.
Okay, I'm listening.
First, there's affirmation, which are basically simple, bold statements repeated constantly. You just keep saying it over and over again. It doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to be said with conviction. Then there's repetition, which drives the point home. You're embedding it in the subconscious, whether people realize it or not. And finally, there's contagion. The idea that ideas can spread, almost like a disease, especially through powerful example.
So affirmation, repetition, and contagion.
Right.
These are the tools of the neurotic leader.
Yes.
Okay. He also talks about this mysterious force he calls prestige. Like what is
this?
This mysterious force.
So he describes it as a kind of fascination that basically paralyzes critical thinking. It inspires awe and obedience.
Got it.
And he says there are actually 2 types of prestige. There's acquired prestige, which comes from titles, wealth, position,
right.
even if someone doesn't actually possess any personal merit.
Right. So it's like inherited prestige almost.
Yeah, in a way.
Yeah.
And then there's personal prestige.
Okay.
Which is this more magnetic quality.
Okay.
It can be enhanced by, but it's actually independent of external factors.
So you could have all the titles and wealth in the world, but still lack that...
that personal magnetism.
That personal magnetism, yeah. I mean, in the modern world, think about how... like celebrity endorsements work.
Exactly.
You know, do you buy things because you truly believe in them?
Right.
Or because someone you admire is promoting them, you know?
Exactly.
He also brings up this distinction between these deep-seated, stable beliefs.
Right.
And more superficial, like, fluctuating opinions, you know?
Yes. So he's arguing that changes in opinions, they're often more apparent than real. They're limited by this underlying racial character.
So for example, what would be an example of this?
So he uses the example of French political parties throughout history.
Okay.
And he says that while they may seem different on the surface, they all actually reflect this underlying French mentality.
Interesting. So even though they have these different platforms, they're all kind of operating within this same framework.
Exactly.
Okay, and finally, he claims that opinions are actually more changeable than ever in his time.
Yeah, so this is the late 19th century.
Right.
And he gives 3 reasons for this.
Okay.
First, the weakening of traditional beliefs.
Okay.
Second, the growing power of the masses who are unchecked by strong leadership.
Okay.
And third, the rise of the press, spreading conflicting viewpoints very rapidly.
So does this sound familiar? I mean, are we even more bombarded with opinions today than in Le Bon's time, you know?
Exactly.
Like this constant stream of information coming at us from all directions.
It can be hard to even know what to believe anymore.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
Yeah, so Le Bon was really onto something, you know, even back then. He was seeing these trends that would only become more pronounced in the 20th and 21st centuries.
Exactly.
So we've got a lot to think about here.
Yeah.
And in the next part of this deep dive, we're going to really explore how Le Bon's ideas apply to our modern world in more detail. So stay tuned.
Yeah. It's what's fascinating is Le Bon doesn't just talk about crowds as this single, like, monolithic entity, you know? He actually classifies them into different types. And he explores how their unique characteristics shape their behavior.
Though not all crowds are created equal. Some are more
susceptible to influence than others. What distinctions does he make?
So he differentiates between heterogeneous crowds and homogeneous crowds. So heterogeneous crowds are those composed of diverse individuals, you know?
Like a mix of...
Yeah, a mix of backgrounds, beliefs, motivations.
Like the crowds you might see at like a street protest or a political rally.
Right, or even a sporting event.
Right. That classic image of a crowd, you know?
Exactly, just a blend of everyone and anyone.
And then homogenous crowds would be those with more shared traits, you know? Like groups united by a common belief or profession or social identity.
Exactly. So think about religious groups. Military units, professional organizations.
Yeah, those groups have a stronger sense of unity and shared purpose.
Right. And Le Bon argues that these different types of crowds act in very distinct ways. He even dedicates a section of his book to what he calls so-called criminal crowds.
So-called criminal crowds. That sounds a bit ominous, as you're referring to, like mobs or riots where...
He's talking about crowds that engage in acts that, if committed by an individual, would be considered criminal. But Le Bon argues that in these instances, it's not necessarily about individual criminal intent. It's more about the overwhelming influence of the crowd itself.
So the idea is that people might not commit these acts if they weren't part of a crowd.
Exactly.
Almost like the anonymity of a large group, allows for this diffusion of responsibility.
Yeah.
Does he offer any examples of this?
He uses this chilling example from the French Revolution.
Right.
The storming of the Bastille.
Okay.
The governor of the prison, Delaunay.
Right.
He was surrounded by this angry mob demanding his execution.
Yeah, that period of history was so volatile.
Yeah.
I can already sense this is not going to end well.
Tragically, no.
Okay.
So Le Bon describes how Delaunay was struck by a member of the crowd, seemingly by accident.
Okay.
And in that moment, someone shouted, "Cut off his head."
Oh, wow.
And the suggestion was immediately acted upon.
Wow. Just one suggestion.
Yeah.
And suddenly this horrific act of violence becomes the collective goal.
Right.
It's terrifying how quickly things can escalate in a charged crowd.
And Le Bon emphasizes this crucial point.
Okay.
The individual who actually killed Delaunay was a cook who was simply curious about what was happening. He wasn't driven by any personal hatred or malice. He was just swept up in the frenzy of the crowd.
That's a disturbing example of how being part of a crowd can create this sense of anonymity.
Right.
Almost as if individual responsibility disappears.
Right.
It's like those so-called criminal crowds.
Yeah.
They're fueled by this collective energy.
Right. That can lead to actions that no one would take on their own.
Exactly. And Le Bon argues that this is a key factor in crowd behavior.
Okay.
So individuals often feel a sense of invincibility when they're part of a larger group.
Yeah.
Like the usual rules no longer apply.
Strength in number taken to a dangerous extreme.
Yeah.
And Le Bon contends that this is
precisely why crowds can be so unpredictable and potentially destructive.
Right.
It can be easily manipulated by those who understand how to exploit these psychological vulnerabilities.
Okay, so we've looked at the darker side of crowds with these criminal crowds. Yeah. But what about examples of crowds that Le Bon views more positively? Does he discuss any of those?
One that's particularly relevant is his analysis of juries.
Juries.
Yeah.
So he sees the jury as a type of crowd.
Yes.
That's interesting. He argues that juries, even though they have a specific task and function within, a structured system, they still display many of the characteristics of crowds.
Oh, okay.
So they're susceptible to emotional appeals. They can be influenced by prestige. They often make decisions based on impressions rather than a purely logical evaluation of the evidence.
That's a little unsettling. Makes you wonder how impartial a jury can truly be if they're subject to these crowd dynamics.
Well, Le Bon suggests that juries can be easily swayed by things like the defendant's appearance, their social status, or even the charisma of their lawyer.
So a skilled lawyer could potentially manipulate a jury into reaching a certain verdict, even if the evidence isn't entirely clear-cut.
That's what Le Bon is suggesting.
He even quotes a famous English lawyer who said, I know from experience that when a jury delivers its verdicts, one or two energetic men are leading the rest.
So a few strong personalities can essentially sway the entire group?
Isn't there a system in place to try to prevent this kind of bias? Judges are supposed to ensure fairness and impartiality.
Yeah, that's the ideal.
Yeah.
But Le Bon argues that even judges who are supposed to embody reason and objectivity, they can sometimes fall prey to the influence of the crowd, the general sentiment of the courtroom, or the pressures of public opinion.
Interesting. He even suggests that in some cases, juries might be more likely to deliver a fair verdict.
More fair.
Yeah.
How is that possible? If juries are so susceptible to these psychological influences.
So his reasoning is that juries are more in touch with the human element of a case.
Okay.
They're less bound by strict legal technicalities and more likely to consider the emotional and social context of a crime.
Right.
He uses the example of a young woman driven infanticide by extreme poverty and abandonment.
Yeah, that's a heartbreaking situation.
So Le Bon argues that a judge strictly adhering
to the letter of the law might see this as just a straightforward case of murder. But a jury, understanding the woman's desperate circumstances, might be more inclined to show leniency.
So in a way, Le Bon is saying that sometimes justice requires a touch of empathy, an understanding of the human complexities behind a crime.
Exactly.
It can't always be reduced to just a simple application of the law.
He's suggesting that juries can bring this kind of common sense and human understanding to the legal process that judges with their focus on legal precedent and procedure might miss.
So juries aren't inherently bad.
They can actually play a valuable role in the justice system, bringing a perspective that considers both the law and the human circumstances.
According to Le Bon, But he also acknowledges their limitations.
Yes, of course.
Like he emphasizes.
He emphasizes they're still susceptible to those crowd weaknesses.
That suggestibility, emotional fluctuations, sways of strong personality.
Exactly. So it's a balancing act, recognizing the potential for both fairness and manipulation.
That brings us to another fascinating category of crowds that he explores. One that feels especially relevant in our modern world. Electoral crowds.
Yes.
So,
and Le Bon argues that these crowds, the masses of people who participate in elections, they demonstrate many of the same characteristics we've been discussing.
It makes sense that those dynamics would be at play in the realm of politics, especially during elections.
When emotions run high.
So how does this play out in an actual election? Like, what are the factors?
So Le Bon believes that the most successful candidates are those who understand how to appeal to the emotions and desires of the crowd. He argues that talent and intelligence are actually less important than prestige and the ability to make grand sweeping promises.
So again, it's that idea of image over substance.
Exactly.
It's about creating this compelling narrative and connecting with voters on an emotional level rather than just presenting a list of policy proposals.
And he observes that voters, particularly those from working class backgrounds, they rarely elect candidates from their own ranks.
Interesting.
Even though those candidates might.
You would think. If a candidate is more relatable, that should be an advantage.
You would think so, right.
Why would they choose someone who's more distant from...
Well, Le Bon contends it's because those relatable candidates often lack the prestige associated with,
with
social status or a powerful reputation.
That makes sense.
He even suggests that candidates should flatter voters' vanity
and make extravagant promises, even if they have no real intention or ability to fulfill them.
That's a pretty cynical view of the political process.
Le Bon mot. Certainly seems to think so.
Are elections really just about winning over?
Well, he believes that voters are more swayed by appearances and emotional appeals than a candidate's actual policy positions or qualifications.
He even goes so far as to say that voters are easily swayed by, like, catchy slogans and powerful rhetoric.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like a politician who can deliver this rousing speech is more likely to win than someone with, like, actual experience and sound ideas. Yeah, even if those ideas might be...
Right, even if they're less flashy or attention-grabbing.
And he gives this example from the Spanish Revolution of 1873. The Radical Party. They used the slogan, Federal Republic, to rally support. Even though, according to Le Bon, no one truly understood what it meant.
So they won an election with a slogan that was essentially meaningless.
Yeah, it was just this vague, inspiring phrase that captured people's imaginations.
But lacked any real substance. Both. Fascinating. And a little alarming. You know? It suggests that
can be swayed by pure emotion and rhetoric without any real connection to, like, to logic or reason. Le Bon is essentially arguing that voters are more susceptible to emotional manipulation than we might like to admit.
He believes that rational arguments rarely hold much sway.
When it comes to moving electoral crowns.
But surely there are examples of voters making, like, informed decisions based on policy positions. Carefully evaluating candidates' platforms, you know. Not all elections are decided by slogans and emotional appeals.
So his point is not that all elections are solely decided by emotion and rhetoric, but he's suggesting that factors like prestige, charisma, and the ability to tap into those deeper emotional currents, they play a much bigger role than we might acknowledge.
So we've discussed juries and elections, two very different types of crowds, but both susceptible to these biodynamics.
So what other kinds of crowds does Le Bon examine in his work? He dedicates a whole chapter to the parliamentary assembly. So he's shifting focus from, like, those more spontaneous crowds to groups of elected officials. That's interesting. He's fascinated by how these groups who are entrusted with making rational and informed decisions on behalf of, you know, the people they represent, how they actually function in practice. And perhaps not surprisingly, he finds that they exhibit many of the same tendencies as the other crowds we've discussed.
So even elected officials, individuals who are supposed to be, you know, intelligent and well-informed, are still subject to those underlying principles of crowd psychology.
According to Le Bon,
It seems counterintuitive. Shouldn't these groups composed of, like, individuals with expertise and experience be more resistant?
You think so?
To those crowdthink patterns. Especially when they're tasked with making decisions that, like, impact entire nations or societies.
Well, Le Bon believes that the very act of being part of a group, even a group of highly educated and accomplished individuals, it can lead to the exaggeration of opinions and a decreased openness to alternative viewpoints.
So instead of fostering like healthy debate and seeking compromise, the group dynamic can actually lead to more entrenched
positions and less willingness to consider different perspectives.
It seems like that would hinder their ability to make, like, sound, well-rounded decisions.
Le Bon uses the example of the Jacobins during the French Revolution. And he describes them as being very dogmatic and logical in their thinking, but also completely detached from the realities on the ground.
So they had strong convictions, but those convictions weren't necessarily rooted in, like, a pragmatic understanding.
Exactly.
Okay, so we spent, like, the last two parts of this deep dive really getting into Le Bon's theories on crowd psychology. But he was writing back in the 1800s.
Right.
You know, is this stuff really relevant to us today?
That's the thing.
Like, I get how his ideas apply to like a political rally or a protest, but what about the crowds we encounter online?
Yeah.
Are those the same?
Well, that's what's so fascinating about Le Bon's work.
Yeah.
So much of it feels really prescient.
Okay.
Almost as if he were anticipating the rise of the internet and social media.
Like, it's a question.
Right.
He couldn't have even imagined.
Right.
But his insights.
They offer this really powerful lens for understanding our digitally connected world.
So you're saying, like, our Twitter feeds and Instagram stories are like modern day versions of...
You might say that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those theatrical performances he talked about.
Remember his emphasis on the power of images to shape beliefs and opinions?
Right.
Today, we're flooded with images every single day.
Think about how, like, a viral meme can instantly spread an idea, you know, shape the narrative around an event, or even sway public opinion.
Yeah, it's like that saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words, but not always 1,000 accurate or unbiased. Right.
And remember Le Bon's 3 techniques of influence, affirmation, repetition, and contagion.
Yeah. Social media algorithms are practically built to amplify those very things.
The more we engage with certain content, the more of it we see.
Right. It reinforces our existing beliefs. Right. And makes us more susceptible to new ideas that align with those beliefs.
Like, we're all living in these echo chambers, you know, surrounded by information that just confirms our biases. It makes it harder to see other perspectives.
Yeah, right. No wonder the world feels so polarized. Right. Le Bon might say that social media is the perfect breeding ground for the kind of crowd mentality he was warning us about.
It creates a sense of anonymity, too, you know?
Exactly.
It emboldens people to say and do things
online.
That they might never do face to face.
And because ideas spread so rapidly online, it's easier than ever for those with malicious intentions to manipulate these dynamics.
So Le Bon would be horrified by the trolls and the bots and all the misinformation that spreads like wildfire online.
It's the very thing he was warning us about.
The power of the crowd magnified and accelerated in ways he could never have envisioned.
Right.
It's a bit overwhelming.
It is.
To be honest.
Yeah.
Are we all just like doomed to be manipulated by like algorithms and shadowy figures spreading propaganda?
Right.
Like, is there any way to resist these forces?
That's where Le Bon's work offers a glimmer of hope. Remember how he stressed the importance of critical thinking and questioning assumptions?
Those skills are more vital than ever in today's information-saturated world.
We can't just passively absorb everything we see.
We need to be like active, engaged, discerning consumers of information.
So we need to be aware of those psychological traps.
The appeals to emotion and prestige that can cloud our judgment and recognize when they're being used to sway us.
Both online and offline?
Yeah.
Exactly. We need to be savvy navigators
of this landscape.
Yeah. Recognizing those manipulative tactics.
And choosing how we engage.
It's not about abandoning social media or retreating from the world.
It's about informed, empowered participation.
Exactly. It's about understanding the game so we can play it more skillfully.
Le Bon might agree with that.
He saw crowd psychology, not as something to fear or avoid.
But as a powerful force to understand and reckon with.
Yeah, we're all part of these crowds, whether we're aware of it or not.
The key is to be conscious participants.
That brings us back to his crucial distinction between stable beliefs and shifting opinions.
Remember how we argued that those deeper, more fundamental beliefs are less susceptible to the whims of the crowd? Perhaps that's where we can find common ground.
Yeah, even in a world that feels increasingly fractured and divided.
So even if we disagree on specific issues or policy,
they still connect on those core values that shape how we see the world.
Le Bon might suggest that's the path forward.
It's about recognizing our shared humanness, even amidst our differences, and engaging in thoughtful dialogue, even when it's challenging.
Yeah, this has been a truly fascinating deep dive.
Yeah, we've explored.
Yeah, we've explored the complexities of crowd psychology. And from the darker sides of mob mentality to the potential for juries to bring a human touch to justice.
We've examined the dynamics.
Yeah, we've examined the dynamics of elections and the challenges inherent in parliamentary systems.
And we've considered
how those timeless principles of crowd psychology play out in our hyper-connected digital world.
Le Bon saw crowd psychology as this lens for understanding.
Yeah, not just how crowds behave, but how societies evolve. How history unfurls.
And even though
he was writing over a century ago,
his insights offer us a framework for navigating the complexities of our modern world. A world where the lines between online and offline, individual and collective, are increasingly blurred.
It's given us.
Yeah, it's given us a lot to think about.
What crowds?
Yeah, what crowds are you a part of that might be influencing your beliefs and behaviors in ways you haven't considered before?
How can you use these insights to be a more discerning participant?
Both online and offline.
We encourage you.
Yeah, we encourage you to keep exploring these questions.
And remember, the power of the crowd is a force to be reckoned with.
But it's also a force we can harness.
For positive change.
It's up to us to choose how we engage.
That's a powerful thought.
Yeah.
And a perfect note to end on.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'd love to hear your reflections on social media.
I use the hashtag.
Yeah, use the hashtag the deep dive.
Hashtag the deep dive.
To share your thoughts.
Share your thoughts.
And until next time. Keep thinking critically.
Keep thinking critically.
Keep questioning everything.
Question everything.
They keep exploring this fascinating world of human behavior.
All right.